to Atlantic history. Many of the things that I'm going to explain here, you can also read them in the course material. However, I would like to emphasize the most important events that took place in Iberia, what is now Portugal and Spain, between the years 700 and 1492. As you can see here, this map was made approximately in the year 1000, and we can see that the Califato de Córdoba, which is Muslim Iberia, is the biggest area in the peninsula. You also have, of course, León, and you have Navarra, which are Christian principalities. So what we shall see is that from the very beginning, which, you know, when the Muslims crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and overran all the Christian kingdoms, when they reached France, they were defeated at the Battle of Tours, and they had to retreat. And this is going to take place during almost 800 years. The Christians trying to push back the Muslims. By the year 1492, the Muslims are only ruling over a very small territory which they called Al-Andalus, and we now call it Andalusia. And there they were entrenched in the cities of Sevilla, Córdoba, and Granada. But what I want to emphasize is that the Muslims created a great civilization in Iberia. Perhaps their cities were more beautiful, the architecture, the gardens, the water fountains, they were incredibly beautiful. Perhaps they lived much better than the Christians in their principalities. All right, now let's go to the next image. And here we have the marriage of Isabel de Castilla and Fernando Aragon, which took place in the 15th century and was kept a secret for a while, because if the other nobles in the Iberian Peninsula had learned that these two had united the kingdom of Castile and Aragon, they would have waged war on them. And so it was kept a secret. And in this painting, it's interesting that we can see both monarchs with their daughter Juana, who was supposed to inherit the throne. However, Juana had mental problems. We called her in history Juana la Loca, and she was never allowed to rule, but rather she was forced to live in seclusion in a castle in Tordesillas. All right, now the next one is the fall of Granada, 1492. During that year, several important events took place. First, the fall of Granada. As we can see here in this painting, when the Muslim ruler is finally admitting defeat, and we see the Catholic king and queen receiving this admission from the Muslim ruler who is forced to leave to Africa. On the left side, you have a portrait of Isabel de Castilla at a somewhat later age. Now, I want to show you some pictures of the Muslim cities in Al-Andalus. This is the Alhambra in Granada. It was a palace where the rulers lived, and the palace is simply beautiful. The use of water fountains, gardens, and the style and of Muslim architecture is just really breathtaking to this day. Here we have the famous mosque of Cordoba. This was the Muslim temple. Naturally, today, after the Christians were able to reconquer their land, this was transformed into a Christian cathedral. But it's beautiful. You can see the typical architecture or arches that Muslims used, and you may notice that they're all geometric decorations, because their religion did not allow them to portray images of Allah or the Prophet or any other image of human beings in their decorations. Now, Um, Here is another important fact about Iberia. Three cultures coincided and lived together very well at times in Iberia. We have here to the left, we have the city of Toledo, which was, of course, already in the hands of Christians. So this entrance, this door of entrance to the city is showing you that this belongs to the Spanish monarchy. Now, in the center, you have a Muslim bazaar, a Muslim shop in one of the Muslim cities, and to the right, you have a Jewish rabbi, perhaps preaching in a synagogue. So I think this is very important to realize that even though they were fighting each other for 700 years, there were times when they got along very well, especially in the city of Toledo, where translators got together to translate all the writings of the ancient Greeks and thus making them available to Europe. In Europe, they hadn't read Aristotle, for example. They had read perhaps Plato, but not other Greek writers. So it was this school of translation in Toledo which involved Muslims, Christians, and Jews, which allowed European civilization and the Renaissance to take place once they were able to read those ancient texts. Now, if you're living under a war, permanent war during 700 years, obviously you are going to prefer certain values or certain ideas as to what it means to be successful in life, and this is chivalry. Actually, chivalry was all over the Middle Ages in Europe. You had to be, you had to be very good at warfare. You had to be able to ride a horse. You had to be brave and things like that. But in Spain, it somehow continued way after it had disappeared in the rest of Europe. Obviously, because they have a war frontier and they're fighting with the Moors all the time. So I have placed here the Mio Cid, which is the story of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, El Cid. And by the way, El Cid, whose life is part of this famous poem, which is part of universal literature, world literature, we might say. El Cid, sometimes for the Moors and sometimes for the Spanish. In fact, the name Cid was given to him by the Moors, not by the Christians. So El Mio Cid exemplifies the idea that they were not always fighting each other. Sometimes they were perhaps good neighbors and they did not fight with each other. Now, to the right, you have an image of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, which is a result of all this this type of culture that preferred values of derived from chivalry. In fact, when Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, he was making fun of this this tradition that had continued in Spain, because as we shall see, there are certain values that were very important for the Spanish, and they are derived from this type of culture. All right, now let's talk about the values that the Spanish embraced as a result of living under a war frontier during 700 years. To begin with, you wanted honor and glory. That's what you seek in life. You want people to recognize that you are somebody, that you are an hidalgo, hijo de algo. No? So those three words are very important. You want honor, you want glory, and you want hidalguía. You want to be considered an hidalgo. Remember that during those days, only hidalgos could ride on horseback. And the common people couldn't bear arms or ride on horseback. That's where the word caballero comes from caballo. then you wanted quick wealth. You did not want a sustainable living. What you wanted was quick wealth. And we can see that how we understand how that started, because when they would make entradas or raids into Muslim territory, they would obviously be able to loot that territory and perhaps get a lot of things made of gold and so forth. So they were used to that. They had horror of manual labor. That's very important, because only the common people would do manual labor. You would not be proud of yourself if you were to say, for example, I built my house with my own hands. That was something that you wouldn't be proud of. Now, this society, as well as medieval Europe, this is not only the case in Spain, consisted of three estates. Those who fight, that is the nobility, those who pray, the clergy, and those who work, the commoners. This is the way they thought their society was structured. Now, they were also, Spanish considered themselves defenders of the faith. Why? Because they were fighting against infidels, the Moors. Why were they infidels? They were infidels because they had heard the word of God, and yet they did not want to convert. So in order to be, an infidel was very different from a pagan who adored idols perhaps, or a heretic who changed the dogma of the Catholic Church. An infidel was somebody who had heard the word of God but was unwilling to accept it. They were defenders of the faith against crypto-Jews, because what happened with the Jews? The Jews had been there for 1,000 years perhaps, and they also loved their homeland, Spain, as did the Muslims and the Christians. But in 1492, the Catholic monarchs expelled them from Spain. And so they said, if you stay, you have to convert. Now, those who stayed and converted to Christianity were called marranos, which is sort of a very demeaning word, marranos. And they were always afraid that those who stayed would be, in reality, judaizantes. That means that even though they pretended to be Christians, they would be, doing certain rituals according to the Jewish religion. They would, for example, avoid eating pork and things like that. So this period is when the Inquisition is has a lot of work to do. They are very, very jealously protecting the faith from either crypto-Jews, judaizantes, or infidels, or heretics. Now, this is a period of time when there is a new identity that will become important, and that is the identity of viejo cristiano. And what did that mean? It meant that your father, grandfather, and so forth were Christians. That you did not have any Jewish or Muslim ancestors. In contrast to Nuevo Cristiano. Who was a Nuevo Cristiano? He was somebody who had been converted, or his father or his grandfather had been converted. And so, just to give you an idea how important this distinction was, Nuevos Cristianos could not come to America once America was discovered in 1492. You had to prove that you were viejo cristiano by showing the baptismal records of your ancestors in order to be able to travel to America. Of course, this does not mean that they did not travel. They could, but they had to bribe their way to America. There was a lot of corruption, and so they had to pay somebody to give them the license to go to America.